Welcome aboard, folks, and thank you very much for joining Your Voice Counts. My name is Phil Tourney, USS Liberty survivor, and very proud of it. Glad to be still around and healthy and mind and spirit. Today we have a very, very special guest. You know, when you have bad eyes, you go to the best doctor you can get. When you have a bad heart, you get the best cardiologist you can get. Well, today we've got the very best of the best. His name is Mr. Richard Gage. AIA is the San Francisco Bay Area architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects. He is the founding member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He is an architect for over 24 years and has worked on most types of buildings constructions, including numerous fireproof steel frame buildings. Most recently, he worked on construction documents for a $400 million mixed-use urban project with 1.2 million square feet of retail, parking and structure, and 320,000 square feet of mid-rise office space. Altogether, about with 1,200 tons of steel framing. My God, that's a lot of steel. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high-rises after hearing the startling conclusions of reluctant 911 researcher David Ray Griffin on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 911. God bless you for that, Mr. Gage. AE 911 Truth now numbers more than 1,600 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation into the destruction of the 3 World Trade high-rise buildings on 9/11. Richard, if you would hang on just a minute, I have to do a little bit of USS Liberty business, and I'll get you right on air. Thank you, sir, for joining us on Your Voice Counts on this very fine Saturday. Folks, the reason I do this show is dedicated, well, first of all, it's not my show. It's the crew's show. It belongs to them and their families. And that's why I do it, and I want to keep their memories alive forever, as long as I'm around. On June 8, 1967, our ship was brutally attacked by the State of Israel in international waters, our flag flying. There's over 850 cannon and rocket holes put in on our ship, over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets, 40 by 40 foot hole in the starboard side of the ship that one of 5 torpedoes had hit, instantly blowing to bits 25 brave American sailors, Marines, and civilians. The sad part, folks, is the United States government, and I hate to say this, was in on it. That's the only explanation any of us can come up with it. They recalled the aircraft. They left us out there alone. They knew we were under attack by unknown jet aircraft. And all of a sudden, LBJ gets on the line and says, "Recall those aircraft, and we're not going to embarrass our ally Israel." Well, hell, we didn't know who was attacking us. So how did he know who was attacking us? This was within 10 or 15 minutes when we got a Mayday call out by Terry Aldebardier that hooked up a antenna that was taken offline, and the whole world heard our cry for help. Well, the United States government heard our cry for help, and they left us out there to die, to be slaughtered by the Zionist state of Israel. Hard to believe? No, it's not hard to believe, folks. We have eyewitnesses. We have testimony from so many different wonderful people. We even have testimony from a man that was there, Ward Boston, in charge of the internal investigation, the Board of Inquiry, and he has recounted everything, saying it was a lie. He was told to lie, as well as Admiral Kidd was told to lie, and many, many other people. The people in our government have been told to lie since LBJ, and every administration since then has taken on the mantra of lying to protect the state of Israel. To hell with the fighting men of the United States of America that they promised never to leave one man behind. Well, don't believe that for 1 second, folks, because it's not the truth. The government will hide things from you that you can't imagine. The USS Liberty is at the very tip of the iceberg of the cover-ups this government has kept away, all to support the Zionist state of Israel. Shame on you, government. Shame on you, elected officials that know the truth and stay silent. Shame on you, Navy Department. Shame on all of you that are involved with this cover-up and murder of Americans on the high seas. RBN has been a staunch supporter of real news, real talk, real people, because you can handle the truth. What a great radio station. John Stadtmiller, the owner of this company, has given me the honor to represent the crew and tell the truth about these 34 men that died and the 175 others who were wounded, including myself, on June 8, 1967. The truth cannot be held down. And the crew of the USS Liberty will not succumb to any more lies. We're getting higher and higher up the food chain, and people are starting to wonder, when is this going to crack? Well, the egg is going to crack. Humpty Dumpty's going to fall off his wall, and he won't be able to be put back together again by the United States government or the Zionist murdering state of Israel. Thank you, John Stadtmiller, for giving me the time to tell the truth, the real truth, about the USS Liberty. Also, I want to thank Kat Faber, our fabulous producer that gets all our guests together and has her beautiful songs on air. Couldn't do the show without her. I thank you, Kat, very, very much. Also, I want to thank Ron Kukl. He was in charge of body recovery and identification June 14th when we ported in Malta to go into dry docks. Also, I want to thank John Gadesco. John missed our last cruise. John was a former intelligence officer aboard the USS Liberty, and he pushed us off with his foot as the tugs pulled us out to sea to say goodbye. John had many, many friends aboard that ship, and he still has many, many friends aboard the USS Liberty and that ship. John has one of the most wonderful websites you can go to. It's tinyurl.com/USS Liberty. tinyurl.com/USS Liberty. Now, folks, I went through that pretty quick, and I wanted to get that done before we bring on our very, very special guest. Now, I'm not going to say a word about what Mr. Gage knows and his counterparts, all respectable, honest Americans that want the truth. And that's all the USS Liberty has ever wanted, is the truth, the crew of the USS Liberty. I'm going to let Richard explain to you how he got involved in his quest for the truth and the barriers that the United States government have put up against his truth. Be right back, folks. Support your sponsors on RBN. God bless you. See you in a moment. Thank you very much for sticking with us. One more little thing I have to say, folks, is this. To the people on the USS Amberjack that were there that day, June 8, 1967, USS Samuel L. Jackson, submarines that were there, we know that they filmed it, and they have all the information we need to get this terrible, terrible attack to the American people and shove it down the Congress's throat for their filthy, filthy cover-up. Also, the pilots of the USS America and USS Saratoga. I beg you folks to get on this radio show and let your heart tell the story. Get free of that pain of holding in this terrible, terrible secret. In my view, you owe it to the United States of America, and you owe it to the duty and honor of the crew of the USS Liberty. So I implore you, if you hear listen to this radio show, and I know many of you do, get a hold of Cat Faber, get a hold of RBN, and we'll get you on air. Mr. Gage, Richard Gage, God bless you, sir, for coming on board. And I will let you start out with whatever you like. And as I learned a few lessons about interviewing people that are experts, the best thing to do is just shut your mouth and let them talk. Welcome aboard. Your voice counts.
Thank you, Phil. It's an honor to be here on your show, and I praise you for standing up for your fellow crew members and the American people. We indeed have had a succession of false flag operations, which I think the USS Liberty event could be classified as in the history of the U.S., and 9/11 is no exception, and I'm quite ready and willing to provide proof of that to your listeners today. So I'll do that if that's what you'd like.
Absolutely, Richard. Please go on.
All right. I represent 2,100 architects and engineers now who are demanding a real investigation of what happened on 9/11 at the World Trade Center. We all have become aware of evidence that was not included in the official reports, that was lied about by the 9/11 Commission report itself, which was, by the way, authored by Philip Zelikow, an insider in the White House, not by the commissioners themselves. We are aware of, for instance, a third skyscraper that collapsed on 9/11. Most Americans, most architects and engineers know nothing about it. And so we start with this because it is new information to most people. And we have had a $400,000 outdoor advertising campaign to alert the American people to the destruction of this third high-rise building called Building Number 7, a component of the World Trade Center, and about half the height of the Twin Towers, 47 stories it was. And on the afternoon of 9/11, after the Twin Towers came down, this building at 5:20 dropped straight down, uniformly, symmetrically, suddenly, and at free fall acceleration into its own footprint, just about. So this is extraordinary in and of itself, and I encourage your listeners to look at the destruction of this building on our website, which is AE911truth.org. And that's AE911truth.org. You can see right on the right side of Building 7 coming down in 7 seconds. From top to bottom, 7 seconds. This is a third of it is falling at free fall acceleration. That means that not one of the 80 columns that were supporting this building, massive steel columns, gave any resistance for any of that period of time, which amounts to about over 2 seconds of its 7-second fall. So we have an immediate problem here. If you're going to have a building that falls, according to the official story, by, quote, normal office fires, this is per NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, which came out with its final report 7 years after the collapse of this building, which we won't call collapse anymore. It was clearly destroyed. And because only explosives can remove all the columns at once to facilitate a symmetrical destruction. Only explosives that are set all at once on each of 8 given floors can facilitate the freely falling building, free fall acceleration, as fast as you drop your cell phone onto the ground. That's how fast this building fell. Now, we've all seen this before. The old hotels, for instance, in Las Vegas, it's kind of hypnotizing to watch. They fall in exactly the same manner. And yet, NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, never seriously examined the possibility of explosive-controlled demolition. Even though every building that's come down, high-rise building, has been brought down by such, and it looked exactly like one, and no building, no high-rise building, has ever collapsed due to fire. And we have a history of 100 examples of very hot, very large, and very long-lasting fires. So we have what is on the surface of it immediately accessible to the American people once they become aware of this building falling and see it, because the American media, the world media, is largely, well, with 1 or 2 exceptions, this building, which is the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history, was not even shown on TV. So we have yet again an example of a clear cover-up. This should have been the most widely studied building disaster in history, and yet it received almost no attention. It was very carefully scripted. Even the AIA, the American Institute of Architects, simply signed off on the official description for this report on this building's destruction, and didn't really even inform their constituents, of which I'm a member of the AIA. And so there's been no discussion about it. It's just uncanny. Well, what's found in the basement of this building, not the basement, but the rubble pile, there's pools of molten steel, is what they called it. Turns out to be molten iron. Leslie Robertson described a little river of molten steel. First responders describe it as molten steel flowing like lava down the channel rails. There is, even in the initial report by FEMA in May of 2002, in their Appendix C, they document very carefully the invasion of the steel that was saved, the invasion of the steel by molten iron and sulfur. Sulfur is added to an incendiary called thermite.
Richard, hold that thought, please. We've got to go to a break. Real news, real talk, real people, RBN, because you can't handle the truth, folks. Don't go away. This is a very informative, exciting show. Support your sponsors, please, on RBN. See you in a minute. Thank you very much for hanging on, listening to this very, very important show, by Mr. Richard Gage. And I'll tell you what, listening to you got me on the edge of my seat. I know somewhat about this, but I'm not an expert. That's why we have you on the air. And please go ahead, Richard, and thank you so much again.
Thank you, Phil. We were talking about the evidence of molten iron found in the pile underneath this 3rd skyscraper, Building 7, that collapsed at free-fall acceleration. We talked about the only way that could happen is if the columns were somehow all compromised virtually at once on each of 8 given floors. We talked about the the original FEMA report, which was scrapped by NIST, and this evidence, which we're now discussing, was removed from the final report. This evidence shows a thermite, and the evidence of thermite, which is an incendiary used by the military to cut through steel like a hot knife through butter. And it actually is a high-tech form of thermite called thermate, where sulfur is added, which effectively reduces the melting point of steel. Sulfur was found throughout the corroded beams, and was a question raised in the initial FEMA report. Where did the sulfur come from? Well, it doesn't come from gypsum board, because that calcium sulfate is an inert ingredient and it can't be separated. And gypsum board has been used, of course, to protect steel, and has never turned around and attacked it. So we have some real serious problems, particularly given the author of that initial report, one of them, Jonathan Barnett, a fire protection engineer, says the ends of these beams are partially evaporated. Well, that takes temperatures of 4,000 degrees. And where do we get such temperatures? Well, it didn't come from jet fuel. There's no jet fuel in this third skyscraper. And even jet fuel is just kerosene. It can only burn 500 to 1,500 degrees, depending on who you talk to. We're talking 4,000-degree temperatures here. Well, that's what thermite creates. It issues molten iron as its byproduct at 4,500 degrees. So we have the evidence in Building 7 for such incendiaries. And why would they use incendiaries? Well, there are patented devices that were patented prior to 9/11 that use thermite to issue a molten iron, and in milliseconds, cutting through structural steel, actually more effective than what controlled demolition experts normally use, which is high-energy explosives like C4 or RDX. They wouldn't use these types of explosives in a deceptive controlled demolition because they give such bright flashes and loud bangs. So the question is, what other evidence is there? Well, for the Twin Towers. I mean, if Building 7 was a controlled demolition, and we're talking about we're talking about access required, right? It takes months and dozens of operatives to plant these explosives. So we want to know who had the security contract. Well, some very interesting figures turn out to be on the board of directors of Securicom and Stratesec, which had the electronic security for the whole World Trade Center complex up until the day of 9/11. Interestingly enough, so we want to know this. So this appears obviously to be some sort of an inside operation. After all, Al Qaeda probably didn't have access to this very highly secure building, which included the undercover field offices for the CIA, offices for the IRS, the Department of Defense, the Giuliani's emergency management floor on the 23rd floor of the building. So we're very concerned that somebody on the inside, some group, had access. So we turn our attention to the Twin Towers, because if Building 7, which was part of the conspiracy on 9/11, was shown to be an inside job, then we have to find out what's going on over at the Twin Towers. And indeed, the first thing we noticed in the videos is that it's not as they told us, which was a gravitational collapse due to structural weakening due to the jet fuel started fires. What we're told is that this upper, in the case of the North Tower, this upper block above the point of jet plane impacts drove the rest of the building down to the ground. And yet that's not what we see whatsoever. The upper part of this building is destroying itself in just 4 seconds, just like Building 7, a miniature controlled demolition, if you will. This huge block is completely, if you could call it, liquefied into its individual structural elements, in just 4 seconds. After that, there's nothing left to drive the rest of the building down. We don't see anything driving the rest of the building down. What we see is a series of explosions, floor by floor, rapidly traveling down the face of each building, south and north towers, symmetrically, pulverizing everything inside the building except the steel, the aluminum panels, and large machinery and so forth. In fact, 90,000 tons of concrete is pulverized in midair, well before there's any collapse down at the ground. And this concrete is spread from river to river in a very fine powder. 30% of the World Trade Center dust is this powder. And what they find in this powder, a international team of scientists led by Niels Harrit in Copenhagen, they find small red-gray chips, what amounts to tons of these small red-gray chips. These are very curious. They look into it with an electron microscope 50,000 times, and they find nanoparticles of iron oxide and aluminum powder, perfectly mixed in the proportion to become thermite. So we're talking about nanothermite here, a very sophisticated form of thermite made only in the most sophisticated advanced defense contracting laboratory. This is a very, very high-tech material that should not be found in the World Trade Center dust. And by the way, when they take these red-gray chips and they put them in a heater, a differential scanning calorimeter, they, at about 800 degrees or so, they ignite and produce incredible temperatures and energy and molten iron microspheres, small spheres of molten iron, which cool and fall. And these are found not only in this independent test, but by the USGS. In fact, the USGS, U.S. Geological Survey, and R.J. Lee, a consulting firm, doing toxicological studies on this dust, find what amounts to hundreds of tons of this stuff, or at least 100 tons, because 6% of the dust samples in some areas are composed of this these spheres, which they have no idea where they came from. You can't reproduce it. They are analyzed, and they find the independent team finds that they're composed of aluminum, iron, and they have manganese in them, silica, and oxygen, other forms of the byproduct of thermite. So even the official story validates the thermite theory, but this is not discussed in the final reports. It's simply ignored. So that's consistent with the fact that in a pancaking collapse of the Twin Towers, which is basically what we're told happened, we would expect a stack of 110 floors at each of these, at the base of each of these towers. But that's not what we find in the photographs. There's only a couple of stories of perimeter columns, core columns, miscellaneous debris. Where are all the floors? I mean, we're talking about 110 acres of concrete in 110 floors. They're an acre in size each. There's galvanized metal decking with the same square footage that is almost all missing. So something incredible happened in this building to pulverize all that concrete, evaporate the 220 acres of galvanized metal decking, the trusses, 6,000 of them in each building are missing.
Richard, we got to go to a break, and we do have a caller or two. Fascinating insight. As you say, you're a sleuth in this technology, and I believe every word you're telling me. All we have to find out is who's hiding it and why. We support your sponsors on RBN, folks. We'll be right back. Yeah, welcome back, folks. Thank you very much. I just want to say a couple things, Richard. The naysayers, and listen, everybody has their own opinion. Okay, let's say that the 9 people that put those airplanes into the trade towers, 1 and 2. That certainly doesn't say a word about Building 7. Building 7, I've seen it go flat many, many times, over and over and over again, along with 1 and 2. So, I do know in World War II, I believe it was a B-20 or B-52 that hit the Empire State Building. It rocked a little bit, and it's just fine. So, absolutely, I believe this was done by who? By our government. With who was controlling all the security? Who was giving these people access to put all this thermite all over the place to destroy these buildings? That's the question. Why is our government covering it up? And we got to take a caller, Richard. I do appreciate it if you'd answer them. And thank you, Tom from New York. This is your town, and you probably saw the towers come down. Maybe you didn't. Welcome aboard. Your voice counts.
Hi, thanks for the time. I remember that day as it was yesterday, and I remember the odor coming from Ground Zero. That was the bodies that we were smelling, burnt and decaying human bodies. So this is a very serious topic. I remember the motive being suppressed. The mastermind of 9/11 said he targeted the towers in order to wake the American people up to the atrocities that America is committing by supporting Israel. And that's what this was about. The signs of fire-induced collapse were captured on images, photos, and video. We can see many minutes before the towers collapsed that the exterior load-bearing columns were bowing. We can see floors were sagging. That's a fire-induced collapse. Mr. Gage doesn't understand that when you release that much potential energy, it can rip a building apart. And World Trade Center 7 was just a building...
Well, let's take the points one at a time. Why don't we take it one at a time? Because I think you're bringing up some great points. And I've seen your video, and it needs to be properly debunked. So let's take your point about Boeing columns in the World Trade Center. Indeed, there were columns at the point of jet plane impact that were Boeing just a moment or minute prior to the collapse. So the question is...
No, they started Boeing within 18 minutes of the initial impact because the fires were burning and weakening the
Tom, please let Richard finish his words, and then you can, say what you want to. Go ahead, Richard.
Yeah, let's set aside for the moment how many minutes they were Boeing. The point is what caused the Boeing. What we're told caused the Boeing is that the fire softened the steel in the trusses, and the trusses began to sag. Now, sagging trusses would not put any lateral or hardly any lateral pressure to pull in those columns. It's just not there. In fact, in the computer model, hold on, I'll just finish. In the computer models, NIST had to impose an artificial 5,000-pound load at each column in order to get them to bow in the computer model. So what could have caused the bowing? Well, the core columns, having been severed, would have gone down, which would have pulled the trusses, which would have pulled the exterior columns. So that's how the columns were bowing.
Well, you don't understand the timeline, because within 18 minutes of the impact, we can already see the effects of the fire on the steel, and we can see. So, I mean, you're denying the reality of the photos. You can see them at my website, Representative Press. You can see them in videos at YouTube. Just search Representative Press, and you can see photos of the Boeing columns. Many, many minutes. I'm talking about half an hour at least before the buildings came down. That's a fire-induced collapse.
So the question is, what caused those columns to bow? And clearly, sagging floor trusses did not cause those columns to bow. You're going to go on to make a second point about World Trade Center 7. Let's go on.
Right. That World Trade Center 7 was just a building near the targeted towers. As I said, the towers were targeted so the American people could wake up to the atrocities that America supports by supporting Israel. And that was the motive. You know, on 9/11, on the morning of 9/11, Dan Rather suppressed the motive. His news, the Reuters news wire said the al-Qaeda leader wanted to punish the United States for supporting Israel, and he suppressed the word Israel. He's also the first man to become fascinated with a building that just happened to be near the targets. Meanwhile, firemen for hours before the collapse were saying that the building is going to come down. Now, you're calling these firemen liars. Chief Daniel Nigro said that an expert told him that the building was in jeopardy. So no way in hell is that a controlled demolition.
All right, I'll respond to that. The word on the street was that there was structural damage to the building. This has never been documented or shown by NIST.
So you mean so you're calling the fire chief a liar?
Well, I know you like to say that, but that's not what I'm saying.
Nigro says that he was told by an expert that it was in jeopardy. Are you saying that's false?
I don't doubt that he was told by somebody.
He says that he was told by an expert that the building was in jeopardy of collapse. Are you calling him a liar?
I said that I don't know what he was or wasn't told, and I'm sure he probably was told.
He was told, sir. He says that he was told.
Hey, Tom. I give great respect to everybody's views, but there's no sense to yell at Richard for his views. You have your views. He has his views. I have my views. We all have views. But
I'm sure he was told.
Yeah.
I'm sure he was told by somebody that there was structural damage.
He was told because there was structural damage.
I'm not calling him a liar.
Why are you
the evidence speaks for itself, Tom. No, we're not calling anybody in particular liars. We're pointing to the evidence for controlled demolition, which you're not addressing at all with respect to Building 7. How did it fall at free fall acceleration? No resistance.
Well, I have. Somehow we lost Tom. I don't know what happened there, but I do apologize for his outburst against you. Listen, like I said before, we all have our own opinions, but scientific facts and the residue of thermite suggest a demolition, as you said before, that would happen in Las Vegas or other places where the buildings come down in their own footprints. Now, I used to be in the construction business, and I used firefighting equipment or foam to put around the steel structures, the frame of the building, and it was supposed to take so much heat. It would take a heck of a lot more heat than 1,500 degrees, 4,000, 15,000, whatever you said. I'm certainly sure it wouldn't take that, and they knew it. And I believe you. I believe the towers came down, flattened by each story that came down in a very fast fashion. And then we have Building 7 that said that kerosene or diesel fuel brought it down is ridiculous.
Well, the official story does, in fact, dismiss diesel fuel as a contributing factor in the destruction of Building 7, as they do the damage caused by some of the beams that hit it from when World Trade Center North Tower came down. So what they cite in the cause of Building 7's collapse is a major fire on floor 13, which caused thermal expansion. Well, first of all, this major fire was out an hour prior to the collapse of this building, or the initiation of its collapse. So they're lying.
Here comes the music again, Richard. We got a few minutes left. Hang on, please, Richard. And I just really appreciate you come on again. I respect your opinion very highly. Support your sponsors, folks, on RBN. We'll see you in just a second. We'll close out. Oh, okay. So we're done, Richard. We only got 30 seconds left. If you want to go ahead and say anything else, Richard, I appreciate it. We need to get you back on air. And what we need to find out is why the United States government is covering up this tragedy that killed so many innocent Americans.
Indeed. I encourage people to look at the evidence at ae911truth.org and join us on our tour through Canada of 17 cities from Victoria to St. John in Newfoundland.
This was within 10 or 15 minutes when we got a Mayday call out by Terry Aldebardier that hooked up a antenna that was taken offline, and the whole world heard our cry for help. Well, the United States government heard our cry for help, and they left us out there to die, to be slaughtered by the Zionist state of Israel. Hard to believe? No, it's not hard to believe, folks. We have eyewitnesses. We have testimony from so many different wonderful people. We even have testimony from a man that was there, Ward Boston, in charge of the internal investigation, the Board of Inquiry, and he has recounted everything, saying it was a lie. He was told to lie, as well as Admiral Kidd was told to lie, and many, many other people. The people in our government have been told to lie since LBJ, and every administration since then has taken on the mantra of lying to protect the state of Israel. To hell with the fighting men of the United States of America that they promised never to leave one man behind. Their memories alive forever, as long as I'm around. On June 8, 1967, our ship was brutally attacked by the state of Israel in international waters, our flag flying. There's over 850 cannon and rocket holes put in on our ship, over 5,000 armor-piercing bullets, 40 by 40-foot hole in the starboard side of the ship that one of 5 torpedoes had hit, instantly blowing to bits 25 brave American sailors, Marines, and civilians. The sad part, folks, is the United States government, and I hate to say this, was in on it. That's the only explanation any of us can come up with it. They recalled the aircraft. They left us out there alone. They knew we were under attack by unknown jet aircraft. And all of a sudden, LBJ gets on the line and says, "Recall those aircraft, and we're not going to embarrass our ally Israel." Well, hell, we didn't know who was attacking us. So how did he know who was attacking us? You have bad eyes, you go to the best doctor you can get. When you have a bad heart, you get the best cardiologist you can get. Well, today we've got the very best of the best. His name is Mr. Richard Gage. AIA is a San Francisco Bay Area architect and a member of the American Institute of Architects. He is the founding member of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. He is an architect for over 24 years and has worked on most types of buildings, constructions, including numerous fireproof steel frame buildings. Most recently, he worked on construction documents for a $400 million mixed-use urban project with 1.2 million square feet of retail, parking and structure, and 320,000 square feet of mid-rise office space. Altogether, about with 1,200 tons of steel framing. My God, that's a lot of steel. Mr. Gage became interested in researching the destruction of the World Trade Center high-rises after hearing the startling conclusions of reluctant 911 researcher David Ray Griffin on the radio in 2006, which launched his own unyielding quest for the truth about 911. God bless you for that, Mr. Gage. AE 911 Truth now numbers more than 1,600 architects and engineers demanding a new investigation into the destruction of the 3 World Trade high-rise buildings on 9/11. Richard, if you would hang on just a minute, I have to do a little bit of USS Liberty business, and I'll get you right on air. Thank you, sir, for joining us on Your Voice Counts on this very fine Saturday. Folks, the reason I do this show is dedicated, well, first of all, it's not my show. It's the crew's show. It belongs to them and their families. And that's why I do it, and I want to keep Welcome aboard, folks, and thank you very much for joining Your Voice Counts. My name is Phil Tourney, USS Liberty survivor, and very proud of it. Glad to be still around and healthy and mind and spirit. Today we have a very, very special guest. You know, when you